Alright, ghouls. Today, we're pulling up to the imagination station, and we're gonna hop on that crazy train and take it all the way to the last stop, which is a cold, dark place in the deepest recesses of your mind, where monsters lurk, feeding on your fear, growing stronger with every nightmare, every rush of adrenaline, every time you see their face lurking in the dark of your mind. Because eventually, it turns out, if you fear something enough, you can make it real. Real enough to crawl out of your imagination, out of the confines of your mind. Real enough to look you in the eyes. Real enough to kill you.
Hush, 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 here comes the boogeyman. Don't let him come too close to you, he'll catch you if he can.
In 1921, a little girl named Agnes Hughes came down with a strange affliction. She went from being a bright and energetic girl, a avid dancer and roller skater, to a wasting skeleton, struck blind and mute, and trapped in a catatonic state from which she would never recover. And the cause of her affliction, according to the dozens of doctors who attended to her, was none other than the boogeyman. Now, the boogeyman has long been a catch-all term for monsters that strike fear into the hearts of children. The name might originate from the Middle English bogey or bug, meaning terror or scarecrow. And typically, a boogeyman story is classified as a tale told to children in order to warn them away from bad or dangerous behaviors. A boogeyman might be a pond monster who snatches the ankles of little children who get too close to the water's edge. And in Agnes Hughes' case, the boogeyman happened to inhabit the home of her neighbor. See, apparently, 6-year-old Agnes Hughes was over her neighbor's house when she wandered into a dark room. From elsewhere in the home, the neighbor called to Agnes and said, "Don't go in there. The boogeyman is in there and he'll catch you." Now, I'm not gonna sit here and overanalyze this. It was probably just a throwaway comment from the neighbor, and she didn't have anything to hide. There weren't any dead bodies in that room or anything. Right? It was probably just some bullshit that she said to Agnes to get her out of a room that she just didn't want her in, wasn't properly child-proofed or something. But either something she saw or something she imagined that she saw in that room scared Agnes. It scared her so badly that she ran from the room in hysterics, and she never quite recovered. At first, it was something we've all been through as kids. Agnes went home frightened of the boogeyman, and this fear made her nervous and agitated. Her mother tried to soothe her, but Agnes's fear of the boogeyman only seemed to grow stronger. She saw him lurking in the dark beneath the kitchen table. She saw him in the shadows cast by the flickering lights in the hall. She saw him in a tree outside her window, long fingers reaching out to scrape the glass. She heard him behind her every time she took the stairs up to her bedroom, chasing her all the way up. And though her mother promised that there was no such thing, Agnes's hysteria only grew. For a while, she could be comforted by her mother checking the shadows and assuring her that there was nothing there. But Agnes's terror turned slowly into sickness. Over the course of 9 months, Agnes's muscles seemed to atrophy to the point where she lost her ability to use her hands and eventually the ability to walk. Paralyzed and trapped in a near catatonic state, Agnes was first seen by doctors who came to her Pittsburgh home, and later she was brought to the hospital where countless tests and treatments failed to achieve any results. Over 80 doctors attempted to treat Agnes, but none of them could identify the cause of her sickness or halt the progression of her affliction. Eventually, after nearly a month-long hospital stay, Agnes was released into her mother's care with a grim prognosis. If her symptoms continued to progress, she would die within the year. Agnes's story made the news in Pittsburgh, and soon papers all over the country were printing stories about the girl who was being scared to death by the boogeyman. Some of them were accompanied by this chilling photograph of Agnes, her haunted eyes staring out of the page, along with sensational titles like "Boogeyman who numbed the body and brain of Agnes Hughes has now stolen her sight," "Scared by phantom boogeyman, child of 6 is dying, sight gone, body paralyzed." Agnes's mother held out hope for her daughter's recovery, and with Agnes's story getting national coverage, Agnes and her mother were inundated with mail from across the country. I can barely imagine what kind of shit they were getting. I bet there was a lot of unsolicited advice, you know what I mean? I bet there was a lot of pray the demon away bullshit letters coming from them. Get bent. But apparently, there were also letters from people who had experienced similar bouts of terrified paralysis and recovered. And here's the one that interests me the most. There were apparently letters to Agnes from a boy in Rochester, New York, who had also dealt with a boogeyman nearly draining his life. And he promised Agnes that he had discovered a cure for the boogeyman blues. He told Agnes that he could show her how to get rid of the boogeyman if she came to play with him in Rochester. And immediately I was like, hold on, I gotta draft this as a middle grade book right now. But unfortunately, Agnes never made it to Rochester. She continued to waste away for fear of the boogeyman, and she died in November of 1921. Now, let's just get this out of the way right up top. It's very likely that Agnes had a genuine medical condition that had nothing to do with the boogeyman. In a more modern era, she might have gotten the diagnosis and care that she required. But this isn't the Science Channel, okay? We're not here for a rational explanation. We're here to get weird. And I'm about to get real weird in this bitch. Because Agnes's story makes me wonder, what if fear, a powerful emotion, generates a kind of psychic energy? And what if that energy can manifest into something real? Something tangible? Something deadly? Yeah, babe. I'm talking about tulpas. Real quick, if you're not familiar, a tulpa, or thoughtform entity, is a being or object manifested by psychic projection. The concept was first recorded in early Buddhist texts, but the modern understanding of a tulpa comes from the writings of Alexandre David Neil, a Belgian-French explorer slash spiritualist slash anarchist slash total fucking badass. In a 1924 expedition to Tibet, David Neil observed mystical practices, in which magic formations were created by the powerful concentration of thought. She wrote that these mind-made entities could develop a mind of their very own, saying, once a tulpa is endowed with enough vitality to be capable of playing the part of a real being, it tends to free itself of the maker's control. This happens nearly mechanically, just as a child, when her body is completed and she's able to live apart, leaves her mother's womb. But unfortunately, as you may already know, I'm not sure that an anarcho-feminist spiritualist from the early 20th century is the only reason why we're still talking about tulpas today. Any discussion of thoughtform entities would be incomplete without a mention of 4chan. Now, back in the early 2000s, I frequented the X board on 4chan. That was the paranormal board, and this is back in the day before 4chan was, like what it is now. I mean, it was bad, don't get me wrong, but the paranormal board had a lot of great creepy content, and it's still responsible for some of the best creepypastas that are on the internet today. But back then, I remember people talking about tulpas, and I remember the way that the subject turned from something horror creepy to incel creepy. I mean, it was 4chan. What did we expect? Like many occult concepts introduced on 4chan, the ancient Buddhist belief in a psychic projection made manifest turned into creepy, jizz-soaked basement dweller jerk-off fodder. Inevitably, as soon as the concept of tulpas was introduced, the question was asked, Can I create my own thoughtform sex slave? And if the neckbeard sorcerers of 4chan are to be believed, the answer is yes. This sweaty collective of self-appointed thoughtform entity experts became known as tulpamancers. And they say all roads lead to My Little Pony, and as it goes, eventually the bronies were manifesting their own little horny ponies to fuck. Alright, so besides all the slutty Pinkie Pies and Rainbow Dashers that are currently residing in the neckbeard nests of their tulpamancers, what about the thoughtform entities that aren't created as suck and fuck imaginary friends? What about the tulpas that are created by accident? Assuming that this is possible, that the human mind possesses the ability to project psychic energy and create a corporeal, sentient being, then what kind of tulpa would be more powerful and more volatile than one created by the belief of children? Like, imagine a thoughtform entity that is a projection of fear and naive belief, an entity summoned into being by the belief that it exists. I mean, think about it. Remember how real something felt when you were a kid at a slumber party and someone was telling a scary story and everyone just sat there listening to sounds in the dark? Is it possible that it wasn't always just collective hysteria? That sometimes all that fear, all that focus brought something into being, even if just for a little while? And Agnes's story reminds me of another boogeyman tale from the dark annals of history, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. If you don't know the legend, the story goes that in 1284, the German town of Hamelin was experiencing a rat infestation. A man in weird multicolored clothes showed up and said that he could get rid of all the rats. He and the villagers agreed on a price, and then he pulled out a pipe, started playing, all the rats came out, and they followed him out of town to a nearby river where they all drowned. But once all the rats were gone, the villagers changed their minds about paying the piper. So he vowed revenge. And on St. John and Paul's Day, when all the adults were at church, he came back. This time, he was dressed all in green, like a hunter. And he started playing his pipe. Only this time, it wasn't rats that followed him. It was the village's children. 130 children followed the Pied Piper out of Hamelin to a nearby cave, and they were never seen again. Now, it's easy to chalk this up to being an old legend, but there's evidence that something really did happen to the children of Hamelin in 1284. And I won't get into all of that now, but I will tell you that the thing that I find most chilling is that in 1384, in the Hamelin Town Chronicle, there's a cryptic entry that only says, "It has been 100 years since our children left." And there were a lot of theories posited about the Pied Piper. Was it an allegory? Could the kids all gone off on the Crusades and never came back? Was it a serial killer, a plague, some kind of mass murder or accident? But sometimes I wonder if the Pied Piper might be something else, something brought into being by collective belief, a boogeyman made real. It wouldn't be the first time, or the last time, that children's belief in something blurred the lines between legend and reality. Take, for example, Slender Man. Now, we all know Slender Man isn't real, that the whole lore of Slender Man starts with a photoshopped image posted on the Something Awful forums during a Photoshop challenge. But it's hard to deny that the Slender Man legend took on a life of its own pretty quickly. Between all the photoshops that came out, the creepypastas, the YouTube videos, it became hard to trace the origins of the legend. And the kids consuming all of that Slender Man content, especially the YouTube videos, they believed it was real. Take, for example, the Slender Man stabbing case, where two girls were so convinced of the reality of Slender Man that they lured a third girl out into the woods and tried to stab her to death to appease the entity. I think that you could argue that to them, Slender Man absolutely was real. Now imagine thousands of kids who all believe in Slender Man, lying awake at night with pounding hearts and clammy palms, their whole mind focused on what they're afraid of, picturing him every time they close their eyes, his name repeating like a mantra in their minds. I mean, if psychokinetic energy exists, this would have to manifest something, right? And there's something else worth noting. Something that really links Slender Man and the Pied Piper and Agnes's boogeyman. They all have a name. And I wonder if there's extra power in naming something like this. Does the name itself call it into being? Or does the name just give the mind a focal point? A mantra at the center of the fear. A name to repeat again and again in your fear-filled mind. Essentially meditating a monster into reality. Thoughtform entity or collective madness, it doesn't really matter. If you believe something is real, maybe in a way it really does make it real. It did for Agnes anyway. And that's it for today. Except, oh, hold on, let me show you this cool thing I got. It's a fucking glow-in-the-dark model kit of the Addams Family house. Like, are you obsessed? Are you living for it? I got special glue to put it together. The glue came, so I'm gonna try to make a video of me putting it together. Hopefully I'm not an utter failure. Hopefully I don't embarrass myself. But we'll see. I don't know, it's so cute. It comes with little windows with all the family members. You can put them in, and oh my god, I'm so excited. Anyway, for now, I love you ghouls. Sweet dreams.
Children, have you ever met the Bogey Man before? No, of course you haven't, for you're much too good, I'm sure. Don't you be afraid of him if he should visit you. He's a great big coward, so I'll tell you what to do. Hush, 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 here comes the Bogey Man. Don't let him come too close to you, he'll catch you if he can.